All right, welcome back to the channel, everybody. I am an avid herpetologist, and today is a video I know you guys have been asking about for a while. We are finally getting around to talking about Machinedramon in the upcoming EX3 format. This has been the crown jewel that we've been looking forward to for all of my fellow Machinedramon stands out there, as we're finally getting a phenomenal secondary boss monster to go right alongside EX1 Machinedramon. So we're going to be doing this very similar to how I did my last looking forward video for Machinedramon. We're going to be talking about a lot of the new cards that are being introduced to the deck, and then I've got 3 different builds that we're going to go over because, again, one of the things about Machinedramon, no matter what format we're in, this is never going to be a solved deck. As the format changes and shifts, all of the tech options that you're going to be running, because this is a very tech-heavy deck, are also going to be changing. And that's actually why this video has taken so long for me to finally get around to making. As all of you guys know, we recently had some big shakeups to the format, thanks to a recent ban list update coming from Bandai. So with that in mind, we're really, at least me personally, I don't know what to expect going into this coming format. So before we even get started, I want to make sure I am very clear. All of the lists that you're going to see are, again, rough drafts. Even more so now than they were going into BT10, because at least we had a rough idea of what BT10 was going to look like. I don't know what EX3 is going to look like. Now that Crossheart is not going to be the top seeded deck anymore, we're going to have a free-for-all in the first couple of weeks of this brand new set, which I am honestly very excited about. I love that we're going to be seeing a lot of other archetypes get to kind of fight for control and dominance in the meta. I think it's going to be a wacky, wild couple of first weeks. But the main reason I'm bringing all this up, as I mentioned, this deck is going to change and shift depending on how the meta winds up looking. So please don't take anything that I say in this video as hard fact. I'm going to be giving my opinions about a lot of these new support cards and how I think the deck is going to change and evolve to adapt to a new coming format. So we're going to go ahead and get into it here. We've got a list of cards. The first couple on the top row here are new to the archetype. However, you'll also notice there are some older cards here, and we'll talk a little bit about them and why they're here in just a minute. But before we get started with anything else, we have to talk about the big, giant, awesome elephant in the room, and that is the brand new EX3 Chaosdramon. This is the card that is going to bring Machinedramon up into people's attention for probably the first time in a little while. Unless you have a Machinedramon stand in your locals, you probably haven't seen a lot of the Machinedramon list. It is not a big meta contender. In fact, most of the tier lists you'll see for previous formats don't even mention it most of the time. But it's going to have a hard time completely leaving it out now that this card is coming into relevance, as this absolutely is going to give the deck a lot more bite. So this is going to be, for the most part, straight up replacing the Chaosdramon that we had from BT6 or 7. So Chaosdramon here has a lot to unpack. He has 12 to play and 12,000 DP. He is also 4 to Digivolve from a level 5, either red or black. So far, pretty similar stats to the original Chaosdramon. However, this is where things finally start to look up. So he still keeps the effect to Digivolve 1 from any Machinedramon, so you can put him on top of a Machinedramon for a cost of 1. He has an on-play and when Digivolving effect. Now, moving into future formats, we also have a new Machinedramon coming in BT11 that shares this mechanic with on-play and when Digivolving, and that's going to be relevant, and I'll explain why in a second. But on-play or when Digivolving, you can place up to 3 red or black level 5 cyborgs up underneath of Chaosdramon, and you get a trigger of D-Digivolve 1 on one of your opponent's Digimon for every card you place. Now, this has been the source of a lot of contention in terms of how this is supposed to work. Is it 3 stacks of D-Digivolve on 1 Digimon? Is it a stack of D-Digivolve 1 on 3 different Digimon? Or is it just 3 instances of D-Digivolve that you can distribute how you want? So you can do 3 and 0, 2 and 1, all 3 on different things. The ruling that I'm seeing coming up most frequently, which is why I'm going to judge, just to discuss it with this in mind. If I am wrong, again, please let me know. And again, also please provide a source, because I've been trying to figure out how this is supposed to work. But the way that it seems to work by the rulings that I have seen most is the 3 instances of D-Digivolve distributed however you want, which, let's be clear, is going to, of course, be the best version of how that effect could go. You want to have the most flexibility in how that effect works. So you can D-Digivolve one thing twice and another thing once. You can hit 1 stack for 3 D-Digivolves. That seems to be the way that this effect is working. So instead of deleting opponent's Digimon equal to the number of level 5 cyborgs with 6,000 or less, instead we get to D-Digivolve. Now, you guys know I'm a big fan of D-Digivolve. I think it is a phenomenal mechanic, especially now that we are moving into a format where stack building is probably going to be a lot more relevant again. We had a teeny tiny window there where go wide decks were becoming a big thing because of the new Digicross mechanic. Cross Art was very much a go wide deck, and Digivolve didn't really hurt that deck a whole lot unless you were checking it in security with things like Ultimate Flare or the old Chikurimon. Now, however, with that gone, I think we're more than likely going to see whatever the new decks that rise up, they're probably going to be stack building decks. Now, this is going to be very good against those particular style of deck. He also has an all turns effect where you can remove 2 of his level 5 materials to prevent him from being destroyed or leaving play, moving to either the hand or the deck. Now, he can still be chaos degraded. This one does not have EX1 Machinedramon's immunity to DP reduction, so there is a little bit of trade-off there, but not being able to get bounced to the hand or tucked into the deck is a very, very nice form of protection. So we really, really love to see it. Now, the other big reason that this Chaosdramon is so huge, and the reason that I have long been saying that black-based Machinedramon is probably going to be the way to go from here moving forward, is because Chaosdramon here greatly incentivizes stack building. The old Chaosdramon, obviously when you build up into it, you can tuck a single material underneath it, which is okay, and you'll be able to delete some stuff, but typically the old deck would want to be hard playing Machinedramon and then putting Chaosdramon on top of that if necessary, which is why red base was very popular, and still will be popular, don't get me wrong, I know it's still going to be popular, it is still a very strong archetype, but since this Chaosdramon finally has an on Digivolving to tuck 3 sources, it will greatly incentivize building up your stacks into your level 5 and then slapping Chaosdramon on top, which will ultimately lead to him having 4 sources. So he will still have Machinedramon's 3 lives even if you build him from a stack. And that right there is why I think this deck is finally going to be more relevant. You're going to be able to see scary boss monsters that you can drop without having to fill your graveyard and then drop this Machinedramon from your hand. It's a much more flexible playstyle now. Now, I did mention the on-play / when Digivolving was relevant. Not only does the when Digivolving tuck sources, but since this is the very first Chaosdramon that has an on-play to tuck sources, this also means that for the first time since its inception, the option card, Attack of the Heavy Mobile Digimon, which is the Blitz option card for Machinedramon, has a second target. So basically, I got to make sure I go over all of this because there are some things to unpack here in that regard. To begin with, the way the option card works, when you would play a level 6 Machine Digimon from your hand, hard play it, if it has sources or materials underneath it when it enters play, it gains Blitz and Rush, meaning it can attack directly, and even though you're passing turn, you can still Blitz in that attack. Typically, you would do this, of course, with Machinedramon, because that was the only card in the game that you would be able to hard play as a machine with sources, because it has the effect to tuck them. So now we actually have a second level 6 machine that gets itself sources on play. So this is the first time we've had other options for that option card. Now, EX1 Machinedramon is still going to by far be the best thing to do, just because it's still the only one that gains memory back. So even though they're both 12 to play, Machinedramon comes down and is going to gain you ideally 5 memory back if you get a full stack, so it's really only going to cost you 7. Chaosdramon will cost you the full 12. It does not refund you any of that cost. However, the reason this is important is because blitzing for game is still a very viable strategy. One that I've done plenty of times, especially since I started playing Grumblemon, where you can close games out very quickly thanks to that. Basically what this means is that you do not have to hold back a Machinedramon at all times in order to be able to use that blitz option anymore. You can now blitz in Chaosdramon for that last hit if you really want to. So you can just hard play the Machinedramon, keep your Chaosdramon back, try to smash the security with Machinedramon on the following turn, and then blitz in the new Chaosdramon for game. It opens up new play patterns. So this card is super diverse, it is super powerful, and I'm very excited to see how it performs in this new meta. Now, with all of that out of the way, that is going to be the longest explanation, I think, as far as these new cards. It is definitely the biggest one for the deck, but we're going to start talking about some of the other ones. Now, there is a new level 5 cyborg coming out in EX3 that is this brand new copy of Cyberdramon. Now, Cyberdramon, thankfully, is a much quicker talk about, but there are some points I want to make sure I go over with this. Now, Cyberdramon is only 6 to play, which is convenient. It's a nice, cheap cost. 3 to Digivolve, 7,000 DP. So it is a very standard level 5 cyborg stat line. Does not have any in-play abilities, but its inheritable is a new one for the archetype. During both turns, as long as you have a suspended tamer in play, or suspended tamer in play, your Digimon gets plus 2000 DP. So basically, this is roll compression where you have the plus 2000 Megadramon, the plus 2000 Gigadramon, you slap them together, and you get that 2000 on both players' turns. So this is really nice. However, the caveat here is, unfortunately, the Cyberdramon requires you to have a suspended tamer. Now, if you've been following any of my streams or you've seen my recent deck lists, you'll know that in my black list recently I've started running copies of Izzy instead of the typical Hero or Kiroshiro. So the big thing with Cyberdramon to remember, if you are going to include this over one of the other cyborgs, make sure you are building around it. Now, my typical build runs 4 copies of Kazu in addition to the Izzy, so there are plenty of tamers to be suspended, and thankfully because of Izzy's rearrange effect, there's a good chance you'll be able to see it easier by smoothing out your draws. However, keep in mind that if you are unable to get a suspended tamer in play, this literally has no text on its inheritables. That is something that you do need to keep in mind. There are still reasons that you may want to just keep with 2000 DP Megadramon on your turn instead of Cyberdramon. Now again, there's going to be reasons to play both, but you basically have to ask yourself, is this Cyberdramon worth playing around? Is it worth gambling that you are going to see that inheritable be live? Or do you want to just play it safe and stick with the regular old Megadramon? I think that ultimately is going to be up to you guys. As I mentioned, this deck is not solved. You can play it however you want. There's going to be lots of different ways to play this deck, especially with the new support, but just keep those things in mind. This is absolutely a very strong card. It's going to be able to do good things, but please make sure you keep in mind the trade-offs when you are building your list. Next up is an option card. It's actually a pretty interesting one. That is Hyper Infinity Cannon. So this is Chaosdramon's signature move. To begin with, it is 6 to play. It does require a red and a black source. However, it does have an effect right off the bat. While you have a level 6 Digimon with Machine in its traits in play, you can use it without meeting its color requirements. So if you have a Machinedramon in play, you don't need the red. You can just play this from your hand. So this is a sort of pseudo ultimate flare. It's actually pretty solid. If you have spots in your deck for ultimate flare, I actually do highly recommend you swap to Hyper Infinity Cannon because it is a very powerful card. But again, there are some stipulations here to talk about. So its effect will immediately Digivolve 3 on one of your opponent's Digimon. You're probably already noticing how heavy the Digivolve theme is in this list. After Digivolving 3, you can then place a card with Cyborg in its traits from your hand or trash under one of your level 6 Digimon with Machine in its traits as its bottom card. Then you can delete one of your opponent's Digimon 6000 DP or less. So this is a nice flavor callback to the original Chaosdramon, and it does have a little bit of a higher ceiling than Ultimate Flare. Being 2 memory cheaper is also pretty nice. It's just a neat little option card. As a spoiler, I'm not currently including it in any of the lists I'm going to be talking about today. But again, the lists that I'm going over are rough drafts. I may actually really enjoy playing this card in the future. I'm not 100% sold on it yet, but it is a card I am considering in some of my lists, and I do think you guys should as well. It's very nice. Its security effect is basically just activating the main effect, so pretty much all status quo there. Now we're going to talk about something that I know you guys have been asking me to talk about for the longest time, and that is the inclusion of Ragna Lordmon from the new starter deck in the Machinedramon archetype. Right off the bat, I'm going to rip the band-aid off. We are going to talk about this, but as a disclaimer, I am still not a huge fan of playing level 7s in Machinedramon. Now, if you're going to play the Ragna Lordmon play, this is the time to do it. The new Chaosdramon is way stronger than the old Chaosdramon. It is much sturdier. It has built-in protection, so it's less likely to get interrupted. So if you are looking to play the Ragna Lordmon tech, I would say this is now the time to do it. And we will go over one of my rough drafts of a list including Ragna Lordmon as one of the 3. But if you decide that you want to do the Ragna Lordmon play, there are some ways that you can kind of build your deck to take better advantage of it, and we're going to talk about those. To begin with, though, we are going to mention Ragna Lordmon himself. He is 15 to play, 15,000 DP, 6 from a level 6, black or red. But it's the DNA Digivolution cost that is so meaningful here. So in essence, what this card is doing, when you DNA Digivolve for Ragna Lordmon, in this case, it would of course be a Chaosdramon and either another Chaosdramon or a Machinedramon, whatever the case is, but you need a red and a black level 6, which is, again, why this is seeming so popular for this deck. What this does is when it DNA Digivolves, first of all, you have Blitz. So right off the bat, it will be able to, of course, attack even if you have passed turn. That's relevant, and I'm going to explain why in a minute. Now, when it has DNA Digivolved, for every 4 sources it has in its stack, you may then trash one of your opponent's security. Again, this is a really big deal. So basically the idea is you're going to have a Chaosdramon with a ton of sources, a Machinedramon with a ton of sources, DNA Digivolve them into this massive, massive stack, and then just wipe out the last of your opponent's security and swing for game because you have Blitz. So it is indeed a very powerful play. And I may even consider, again, trying maybe a copy or two. I don't necessarily know if I'm going to completely build around this card, but it is absolutely worth considering. As I mentioned, since it does have Blitz, it will be able to attack. So in theory, what you can do is, thanks to some of these other cards we're going to be mentioning, you'll be able to have one of your halves in play, Blitz option in your other half, swing for some free checks. Then when your turn ends, you'll get a free DNA Digivolve, which will then trash the last of your opponent's security and let you Blitz for game. It is a very powerful ability, but the same problem I have with this is the problem I've always had with level 7s in Machinedramon. It's going to be bricky. Level 7s are an inherently bricky card type, and again, that is just something that you have to consider. Now, there are ways to play around that. The deck is a very, very powerful draw engine, but you need to be considering the fact that that is something you have to work around if you are trying to play the Ragna Lordmon tech. But if you do want to play the Ragna Lordmon tech, these are 3 cards that will definitely help you with that game plan. To begin with, people wanted me to mention this, and really the only use you're going to have for this particular one is in red bases, because this does not digivolve from black, it just digivolves from red or purple. But this Cyberdramon, don't worry about the when digivolving, has an in-play and inheritable effect where you may digivolve this card into DNA Digivolve this card into something new. So the inheritable meaning if you have built on top of this Cyberdramon and you have that inheritable in your stack at the end of your turn, if you would pass it, you can, before the turn passes, DNA Digivolve, which of course would then trigger Blitz for Ragna Lordmon. That's how you're going to be closing the game out. You are hard playing something like your Machinedramons or your Chaosdramons, getting in for some free damage, and immediately getting to use your Ragna Lordmon Blitz to hopefully end the game. Now, we also have our 2 other Legend Arms, which I think are probably a little better if you are trying to go this route. Both of these have, again, that same inheritable, where if they are in your stack, you can, at the end of your turn, DNA Digivolve. So if you have Raiji or Doraemon in play, the other one here, either one of them, if you have them in play, end of your turn, if you have hard play the other, DNA Digivolve, do your whole thing, right? So it is a pretty powerful play. These guys, however, unfortunately are not cyborgs or machines. Now, there's going to be a bit of a lacking in synergies because of that. If you're going to play one of these 2, I personally recommend you play Raiji Ludo, just because Raiji Ludo has an in-play effect where it is immune to deletion effects on your opponent's turn. So if you have to Digivolve into this and pass your turn before you can do your DNA play, it's going to have at least a little bit of built-in protection. Of course, it's not any guarantee, but it's better than nothing. The other Doraemon's in-play effect is just if it would Digivolve into something with Legend Arms in its traits. Oh, or is black. Okay, so it does also have that caveat of Digivolving for 1 less. So again, there are at least some reasons to be playing these cards. But either way, the reason you're going to be playing these level 5s in those slots, I would say maybe like 2 copies, 3 tops, but I think 3 might be pushing it a little bit. The reason you would do that is for that nice inheritable where you can go into your Ragna and end the game, thanks to all of the sources that your level 6 machines are going to have underneath them. All right, with that out of the way, before we do move on to our deck list, I want to talk a little bit about our level 4s, because this has honestly been the place that I have been having the most difficulty trying to figure out what I want to do with my personal list in this coming format. I've been looking at all sorts of different options, but one of the big things that I have been trying to figure out for my personal list is where some of the tech options I played in BT10, specifically Chikorimon and Machmon, fit into this new format. With Crossheart no longer being the top deck, I'm left wondering how relevant is Chikorimon going to be. Now, of course, it's still going to prevent Death Exmon plays, and Death Exmon is still going to be everywhere. Lo and behold, big shock to everybody. It is still going to be a very relevant card that you need to be prepared for. With that being said, whether or not it's going to be relevant enough that I still want to be running Machmon for inherent protection just for Chikorimon, I don't actually know. But there's lots of other options that we can run here. So these are all different things that I've kind of been looking at and considering. I have played Tankmon in the past. Tankmon here is literally just a 6-to-play, 6,000 DP, 1-to-Digivolve vanilla. It is a cyborg, so it has those synergies. We also have Sealsdramon. Sealsdramon is exact same stat line as our EX1 Gardramons, but it lacks the inheritable. So it is a little bit worse in that regard, but it is still a cyborg, so you keep those you get to keep those, at least those synergies, and this one is able to attack. Now, it's a lose to memory if you attack, but at least it is an attacker that can help you end the game. I've also been looking a bit at Machinedramon. If you guys have not seen Machinedramon before, in the last couple of formats, this card has really been out of favor because we've seen a lot of very go-tall stack decks. However, again, I don't know how this format's going to wind up looking, but while Crossheart was around, the card was finally starting to see a little bit of play again. Machinedramon, for those of you who don't know, is pretty cheap. It is 4 to play, 6,000 DP, but it is 3 to Digivolve, so a little pricey there. It is a blocker that cannot attack, but anytime it deletes an opponent's Digimon in battle on the opponent's turn, you can unsuspend it. So, and that's not once per turn. So basically, anytime it blocks and survives, unsuspend, block again, unsuspend. Basically, it prevents anything your opponent controls with 5,000 EP or less from attacking, unless they have a way to get past Machinedramon through removal or something else. So Machinedramon is always going to be an extremely powerful card in the right meta. Whether this meta is going to be good for Machinedramon or not, don't know. We'll have to see when we get there. But that is definitely a card I've been considering. We also have Nanimon, 3 to play, 2,000 DP, 2 memory to Digivolve, has a security effect to simply play it from your security. Now, the reason to play this over something else, like for instance Shademon, is that nice cheap 3 to play play cost. So this is a level 4, so you can play this for 3 and immediately go into a level 5, which is pretty nice. Of course, out of security, extra aggression is super underrated in my opinion. We have Machmon. I've talked a lot about Machmon already. It's going to go ahead and skip over that. Grumblemon, if you decide to go for a full black tamer package, I've had a lot of success with Grumblemon, so you may consider those hybrids. I don't see a lot of other Machinedramon lists running hybrids, but again, give it a try. You may actually find that it actually works out really, really well for the deck. Another thing I've been considering is actually BT8 Greymon. This is 5 to play, 6,000 DP, 2 to Digivolve from red or black. Has an inheritable on the opponent's turn, where if you have a red Digimon in play, the Digimon in the stack gains blocker. So basically the idea here is that if you have inherent blocker, first of all, your level 5s will also then get that nice blocker inheritable, as long as they are at least part red. But the other side of it is, if you go from this all the way up into Chaosdramon, rather than using one of your level 5 sources for blocker, you'll be able to hold on to this and keep that blocker and then use those sources for something else. Just a cool little synergy. It's something I was thinking about. Don't necessarily know if I'm going to try it, but it did cross my mind. And I dumped on this card really hard when I did my Machinedramon deep dive, but believe it or not, yes, I am actually considering playing some copies of EX2 Gardramon. Now, this card I found to be a bit of an embarrassment. It is not phenomenal, but depending on the meta, again, this may be a card that actually does see some relatively unique use. It is 5 to play, 4,000 DP, and 2 to Digivolve. It has blocker and does not have any effects to prevent it from attacking. So this is a blocker that can actually attack freely. That is actually the big reason that I'm starting to consider this, is I think we're actually in a meta now where having that flexibility in that slot is going to be super helpful. So there is actually one of the lists that I'm going to be considering playing EX2 Gardramon in. So keep your eyes open for that. It does also have an on play, which is a little, not necessarily super relevant, but could actually get you out of a pinch every once in a while. On play, you can give one of your Digimon plus 3,000 DP until the end of your opponent's turn, which basically means you can buff any of your blockers that you want to get them up and over a particular lip if you are noticing that your opponent is building out of your range. So anyways, that's going to do it. These are all different options, and hopefully this illustrates at least somewhat well why, again, this video took so long to make. There are so many options to consider for Machinedramon deck building, and again, as we see how the meta kind of shapes up as we move along, hopefully it will make a little bit more sense. But for now, these are all different things that I've considered. Let's go ahead and start taking a look at some of the actual lists that I've kind of pieced together. So to begin, this is going to be a list that is centered around the new Cyberdramon. So this is a list that is going to play tamers that do suspend. We are not playing Black Izzy. This is actually a very similar list to the list that I just took first place in a store championship with. So a lot of it is going to be the same. So we're going to cruise through some of the basic stuff and go into some of the changes. The whole rookie line for this list in particular is pretty much the exact same. We are still playing the 4 copies of Jakurimon. There are honestly a lot of other rookies I've also considered. Old Jakurimon, going back to Blocker Commandramon. But for now, I think I'm going to keep going with Jakurimon just because Death Xmon is so rampant, and until they ban it, please, please, please. It is going to be everywhere, the ever-present threat, so just having it just in case, I think, is going to be important. This particular list, I'm swapping out the 2 copies of Grumblemon for 2 Machinedramon. I'm just kind of curious to see how it goes. Again, I'm not super sold on it 100%, but we're in the testing phase, and I do think having at least 1 or 2 copies of Machinedramon will prove helpful, especially in certain matchups. This list is still running the 3 copies of Machmon for that nice cheap 4 to play, 2 to Digivolve cost. Synergizes very well with the rest of the deck. Now I want to talk a little bit about our Cyborg lineup, because this has changed a bit since the last format. To begin with, one of the changes that I've made is bumping up the number of EX1 on Digivolve Cyborg. So you'll notice here that we are still playing our 2 Andromon, but we're playing 3 Metal Tyranno, and I've actually bumped up Metal Mamemon to 2 copies as well. First and foremost, I think having blocker reboot is going to be super, super helpful. Something I've noticed in a lot of the games that I've played since BT10 came around is that when you are swinging in with your blitzed Machinedramon, or I guess now Chaosdramon potentially, having a lot of tempo swing on that attack is really important. You can't just, smash your opponent's security. Of course, that helps, but you need to be able to do more with that swing. So one of the things that I'm going to be doing is basically trying to make sure that when I am blitzing in Machinedramon, it will cover as many bodies in that single play as possible. What I mean by that, let's say that you have a stack that has blocker reboot. Let's say that we add in our BT8 Metal Greymon here that lets you attack unsuspended Digimon, and we'll toss in a copy of Metal Mamemon. So what we have done now is we are able to attack over an opposing Digimon that removes a body. We are able to potentially delete a Digimon with our Metal Mamemon trigger, so that's 2 bodies, and our Machinedramon or Chaosdramon will then be able to reboot into a blocker, which blocks a 3rd body. So by playing 1 body, we are handling 3, potentially. That's kind of the mindset that I'm in this coming format, is wanting to basically make sure that we can control the board much more effectively. I'm trying to also play around the much more frequent de-Digivolve triggers that Chaosdramon is bringing to the table, helping Metal Mamemon come into relevance a little more frequently. Jesmon is still going to be a very, very powerful deck in this coming format, I'm pretty confident in saying, and since they have so many DP gain effects at this point, BT9 Megadramon may not necessarily cut it most of the time. But Metal Mamemon, the inheritable is to delete something with play cost 5 or less. So instead of doing DP-based deletion, you can delete by play cost, which they cannot grow out of. So this is going to be a lot more helpful for handling some of these bodies that may grow out of our range. Now, this, as I mentioned, we'll be playing that 1 copy of the new Cyberdramon. We're playing Tamers 6 in total that suspend to help make sure that we have that inheritable live at all times. I did bump up my Metal Greymon count back to 2. I think, again, those de-Digivolve triggers, we want to stack a bunch of them in this deck. Think of it this way. Every time you de-Digivolve your opponent, on their next turn, if they want to just get back to where they were, they have to spend memory. You're basically taxing them to get their plays back, which can be really powerful, especially in the early turns. But when you start really stacking it with like de-Digivolve 3s off Chaosdramon in the mid to late game, again, that can be very difficult to fight your way out of. So I wanted to have 2 copies of Metal Greymon, not only for that, of course, on Digivolve, but also a still incredibly relevant inheritable. We did bump Megadramon down since the primary deck that it has been put in here to counter has now, of course, been kind of dropped down on that ban list. We don't really have many Taikis or anything to pop with this anymore. I do still think he's good to have as a one-of, but honestly, even then, you may decide that you want to take him out. It's really kind of up to you guys. We still have our DP gainers, we have our security attackers, and my level 6 ratios have not changed. We are playing 4 Machinedramon and 3 of the new Chaosdramon. This list is also still playing, of course, 3 of the new Blitz option. I've seen some people wanting to play more than 3. I think it's fine to play more than 3, but I'm still sticking with 3 just because this card is still a -3 in card advantage. You need to not only have the option card and Machine or Cyborg to pitch to it, but you also have to have the Machinedramon or Chaosdramon to put into play off of it. So you need 3 cards to get this card to actually do anything. So for those reasons, I prefer not to get super flooded on them, so I'm only going to be playing 3. This list is still playing, of course, all of its Cyborg Machine synergies. We are playing 4 copies of Kazu, and my Tamer of choice that I went with is going to be 2 copies of Hero, just to make sure, again, that we have that extra DP gain where we can answer in play Death X mods and any big stacks that may be problematic. Having 2k extra DP will matter in formats where, again, things like Jesmon GX are running around that can get very tall very quickly. You may need a little extra oomph, and Hero can help get you there. With that, next up, we're going to be talking about what you guys have been asking for, which is a Ragna Lordmon list. Now, this is my take on Ragna Lordmon, and I'm going to be explaining a little bit of my card choices here. To begin with, we have swapped out the Chikurimon for 4 copies of Sistermon Blanc. This new Sistermon, I have not been able to find a super great home for. I think it's better in red base. I mentioned that in my BT10 video. However, I do think this list actually does make it function to a pretty good use. So it's 3 to play, 3000 DP. The effect that matters is it's another copy of EX3 Hagurumon. So on play, you can discard any card you want and draw 2 cards, so it helps to filter your deck out. The reason I think this is going to be so important for Ragna Lordmon is you need to have ways of drawing cards and filtering that don't just look for machines or cyborgs, because none of the parts of Ragna Lordmon are machines or cyborgs, aside from, of course, your level 6s. So being able to actually dig and find your Ragna Lordmon is going to be important. So we are going to be playing 4 copies of that. I also went ahead and bumped up the BT2 Hagurumon Vanilla, the 2-drop, up to 3, just so we can make sure we Digivolve onto our eggs frequently, because again, it's a free draw. Don't pass up your free draws if you can avoid it. I'm still playing 2 copies of Macmon. This could honestly be anything. It's really mostly here because it's still a machine or cyborg. It's 2 to Digivolve and it's 4 to play. So we can potentially play this for pretty cheap and then go up into our level 5s, which we're going to need to do if we want to be making Ragna Lordmon plays. We're still playing our 4 copies of Cyberdramon. Ratios are a little bit different. I'm still playing the 2 copies of Metal Mame, but we're only going to be playing 2 copies of Metal Tyrannomon because realistically, we're not going to need the blocker reboot, hopefully as much, as long as we can pull off the Ragna Lordmon combo. So that's the big reason for that. Went ahead and played the copy of Cyberdramon. This list is going to be playing 2 copies of Teoludomon. So I'm, again, opting for that black version, and you can already see on the screen here why that is. One of the tamers that we're opting to play here is going to be Izzy. Now, again, all of this is just kind of a rough draft. These are just kind of ideas that I'm putting out there. The reason I'm running with 3 copies of Izzy in this case is, again, because of card filtering. Being able to check your top 3 and then rearrange them however you want will help you find the right pieces that you need. Now, our copies of Sistermon will, of course, lower the chances that we gain our memory back. But again, being able to filter your top 3 cards, that is the really big reason that we want to be playing this card if you are going the Ragna Lordmon route. You need to make sure you find your pieces as consistently as possible. Everything else in the deck is honestly pretty much the same. I did actually cut the option card down to 2, just because, again, you don't necessarily need it quite as often. You don't need to be blitzing in Machinedramon over and over again like you might in other decks if it gets removed. Ideally, we should be blitzing in one of our Machinedramon or Chaosdramons, DNA Digivolving immediately, and the game should be over at that point. So I want to go ahead and bump that down to 2. Hopefully our filtering will find us the pieces that we need. And then, of course, we are playing 2 copies of Ragna Lordmon himself. You may consider playing more. I'm playing just 2 at the moment. But, yeah. If you guys are really excited for the Ragna Lordmon tech in the new format, I am super excited for you guys. I really hope you guys have success. Please let me know in the comments down below, well, how it does for you. I really want to see it do well. Like I said, I am just a bit cautious just because I've never been, as I mentioned, a big fan of level 7s. But if you are going to go level 7 in Machinedramon, hey, go one that will end the game on the spot. Ragna Lordmon is definitely the way to do it. But the last list I'm going to go over, this is the list that is probably the one that I will be running in the new format, and it is very, again, similar to the deck that I have been running with a couple of minor alterations. To begin with, we are still, of course, still playing the same rookie base. I am still at least still going to be playing 2 copies of Grumblemon if I can, which means I am still playing my Black Tamer set. We've got our 4 Cyberdramon, and yes, I am very strongly considering trying out 3 copies of EX2 Cyberdramon in place of Macmon. Just because, again, I don't necessarily think Chikurimon is going to be as vitally important as it was in previous formats. Maybe it is, and maybe I swap back to Macmon, but the way I see it, Chikurimon is going to be relevant in certain matchups. It's also going to be irrelevant in other matchups. So I wanted to have cards that were a little more diverse, having a blocker / attacker that can also buff my board. I did think that that was worthy, at least of partial inclusion, so we are going to try out our copies of Cyberdramon. Now, much like in the other list, we are playing extra copies of our EX1 Cyborgs. I want to be able to get into these and get those on Digivolving effects as often as possible, especially with the new Chaosdramon. We want to load our trash as fast as we can. So the on Digivolve effect, if you're not already aware, all 3 of these cards share the same on Digivolve, where you reveal your top 3, you can add a level 6 machine to your hand, and you trash the rest. So it helps you dig 3, technically 4 card deep, if you count the card you draw for the Digivolution, and then potentially add a second card to your hand, being your Chaosdramon or your Machinedramon. So Now that we are going to have two things that can tuck sources much faster, I personally am bumping these up because I want those on Digivolve effects as often on turn 2 as I possibly can, and I've already explained kind of my reasoning for why I'm doing the ratios the way that I am. This list has currently got Cyberdramon in here. Again, that could very easily just go back to being Machinedramon. I honestly don't know, but I will say that hopefully, if I'm doing the Cyberdramon, I'm basically going to be hoping that I see my Kazu, and I'm going to be able to keep him in play. Hopefully he doesn't get removed by something. All the other ratios are the same as previous lists. That's pretty much it. The only other real thing to talk about is that my boy Izzy here does actually get significantly stronger in this deck in this new format. With the list that you guys currently see on the screen, Izzy only has 2 non-black cards to check in the entire deck. That is so much nicer than the 7 that we had last format, because Chaosdramon from the old set was not part black. Now that the new Chaosdramon shares a black color with red, finally we are going to have the ability to flip a Chaosdramon and still gain the memory back, making Izzy a nice comfortable 3 memory setting tamer. But yeah, with that, that is my analysis and kind of predictions for the coming format. These lists are absolutely open to change. In fact, I'm actually very strongly considering putting EX2 Cyberdramon back in this list, again, to kind of double, triple down on those de-digivolving effects. I really do think in big stack formats, especially like ones we're coming into, it is going to be very potent and very powerful, but we're going to have to wait and see, guys. With that, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to like and subscribe and share the video around. If you guys are big Machinedramon stands, please feel free to share it and leave comments down below. I like talking with you guys. I love hearing your opinions and thoughts on how the deck is going to keep changing and evolving. I really do hope Machinedramon is going to see some relevance in this coming format. I don't think it's going to be top tier still, but this is still very much a deck that rewards the creativity of the pilot, the unpredictability factor of awesome tech choices, and the skill and experience that you will accumulate the more you play this deck. It is a challenging deck, but it is so rewarding when you get good with it. With that, thank you all so much for joining me again. I am an avid herpetologist. I hope you all have a great rest of your night, and I will see you all next time.